Hi, my name is James Andriel, and you're listening to the Back to Human podcast. On today's episode, we have our second returning guest and someone that I am always excited to talk to. On the show with me today, I have Tom Seagar. Tom is an associate professor in the School of Sustainable Engineering in the Built Environment at Arizona State University. He's also the chief science officer of Morozko Forge, which is a company that crafts a beautiful self-cleaning cold plunge tub that is capable of producing its own ice. I did a previous episode with Tom discussing the benefits of cold exposure, and today we will be talking about the cold again. More specifically, we will be discussing a subject that may be considered a little bit taboo, but it's very important and probably not talked about enough. This one is for the male audience. This is a male health, a male sexual health episode, and we are going to be talking about erections, boners. And can cold exposure potentially help with erection quality and almost act as a natural Viagra? Without further ado, Tom, welcome back to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me on, James. It's kind of a touchy topic. If I blush a little bit, it's because 7th grade health class was a long time ago, and we didn't cover any of this information with Mr. Silippo. This is not the kind of context that an engineering professor usually shows up and starts to write about. But the more I went into female reproductive health and the cold, we've got a couple of good articles on pregnancy, for example, the more I realized I was leaving my own gender behind. So I got to give Ben Greenfield a lot of credit. He has been one of the most important advocates for cold exposure and for Morozko Forge. And he's not bashful about this at all. Like, he's written these articles, Men's Health, he's been on the Joe Rogan show, all the different things that he's done with his genitalia. He's done red light on his testicles. He's done some kind of a sound wave therapy thing. I think I read that he put electrodes on there. He injected stem cells into his penis and went on the Rogan show to talk about it. And I'm thinking, if Ben Greenfield can do this, then I should write an article about metabolism and erectile dysfunction, and I should kind of get over myself and help people have this conversation. So I put a tweet out on, somebody was making a joke about shrinkage. It's such an easy joke to make. Ever since the Seinfeld episode from years ago, you get in the cold water, the male genitalia, they like suck up into the body, and we're all gonna laugh about it. And so I put this tweet on there, and I'm like, well, that's not the only possible outcome in the ice bath for your dick. And Greenfield, he put like a little like on that. He doesn't pay any attention to what I tweet, but he noticed that one. And he's like, you're on to something, Tom. And I thought, I got to tell guys, you can get a hard on in the ice bath. The ice bath is not hurting your sexual health. It is like one of the best things you can do for your sexual health. So if anybody's worried about shrinkage and the jokes and those kinds of if they're self-conscious about that, it's time to get over that. Get into the dang ice bath, because customers keep writing to me and telling me it's making a difference. So these are guys, mostly my age, not so much guys in their 20s or 30s, but they'll be a little shy and they'll write in, they'll say, Professor Seagar, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, fire away, that's what I'm here for. And they go, I'm just having these incredible nighttime erections. Like, it's waking me up in the middle of my sleep now. And I just want to know, is that normal? And I have to say, yep. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing. This is the ice bath going right. And I had to get into all the mechanisms about why does that happen? It's fairly complicated. That's the article, but I appreciate having you here so that we can talk about it, and maybe I can get better at explaining it.
Yeah, we definitely need a safe space to be able to talk about this stuff, because as you mentioned prior to the show, like, women talk about this stuff much more than men do. Like, we tend to shy away from it. There's a lot of embarrassment, I guess, that can come up there. It's like, we want to be good performers, and the only way to really fix something is to bring it to light and actually talk about this stuff. If you don't know that there's other things out there that could potentially help you, then you're kind of just suffering on your own when you don't really need to.
You got it.
Yep. So you just released the Men's Health article on your blog, which I will link to in the show notes.
Yep.
And in it, you state that the blood flow throughout the body, including the penis, is controlled by smooth muscle cells. And when these muscle cells are tense or vasoconstrictive, this shuts off blood flow to the penis. When they relax, vasodilation, this increases the blood flow, which increases nitric oxide. And it would be confusing if people are really worried about this shrinkage effect by going into the cold water. Like that's temporary. You're going to get back to normal afterwards. It's not going to be a permanent effect. But what have you seen afterwards? Because you are going to get that vasoconstrictive effect in the cold plunge. But afterwards, I guess, how would it help? What do you think is contributing?
This is super counterintuitive. The idea that an erection is a metabolically intensive activity. First of all, that's surprising because we think running, jumping, powerlifting, chin-ups, these are metabolically intensive activities. And when you're doing a pull-up, the strain is coming in the contraction phase. It takes a lot of energy to contract these muscles. But in erection, the energy is required to relax the muscles because there are the smooth muscles, not the skeletal muscles, but the smooth muscles that control blood flow. To get an erection, you've got to use the blood pressure that the heart creates to push blood into the penis. So on one side, you got to have vasodilation. That opens up the flow, allows the pressure to get into the penis. And on the other side, that's where you maintain constriction. So now the penis becomes engorged with blood because it's got a direct, open conduit to the major arteries that supply it. Ordinarily, these are just tiny little blood vessels. But when the smooth muscle tissue relaxes, then you get more pressure in the penis. Okay, so we understand now the fluid mechanics, but why would it be energy intensive to have to relax those muscles? The smooth muscles are signaled by what are called the endothelium. So if this is a blood vessel, inside there's a thin layer of cells called endothelial cells. It's their job in direct contact with the bloodstream to sense the chemistry and what's going on in there. When they are signaled by chemical or nervous system signals in the blood to do their job of producing nitric oxide, that nitric oxide will diffuse up to the smooth muscle tissues that coat them. So I'm going to review. Blood vessel, endothelial cells on the inside. The endothelial cells must produce nitric oxide, NO, and that NO causes the smooth muscles to relax. So something has to be synthesized. This nitric oxide must be synthesized in the endothelium to produce the nitric oxide that relaxes the smooth muscle tissue. That causes the vasodilation. That allows the blood to flow through. That's why I say it's complicated. But so far, it doesn't sound like it's any big deal. Make your nitric oxide. But nitric oxide is a reactive, high-energy form of nitrogen. You can go all the way down to nitrate. You can go all the way up to higher. I'm trying to think. NO is one of the high ones. N2O5, lots of different forms and combinations of nitrogen. And the higher you go, the more energy and the more reactive it is. Well, that nitric oxide doesn't last very long in the body. So it will signal vasodilation, but it has a short lifetime in the body. Your endothelium must continue to produce this new high energy nitric oxide. And there's only a single layer of cells. So these things, they got to work hard to maintain vasodilation, and they need to get that energy from somewhere. Decades, scientists thought that the endothelial cells did not get the energy from mitochondria because there aren't a lot of mitochondria in the endothelium. It's a lot of mitochondria in your brown fat, a lot of mitochondria in your heart muscles, but not a lot of mitochondria in the endothelium. So scientists thought they're getting their energy from glycolysis, which is the same way that cancer cells make energy, bypassing the mitochondria and getting it from this alternative metabolic pathway. But then new study came out, and it's just last year, and they said, we don't think glycolysis is the process. All the other studies of endothelial metabolism were under proliferation. That is when the cells are reproducing, just like cancer cells reproduce. And when endothelial cells reproduce, and it's not often, they don't have to do a lot of growing, they are powered by glycolysis. But when they isolated the metabolism of these endothelial cells under nitric oxide production, they discovered that the energy for nitric oxide production was coming from ATP. So there might be some microbiologist out there, and he's like, Seagar's wrong. We've known for 25 years that endothelium, they use glycolysis, not mitochondria. And I wouldn't be saying this if there wasn't a 2022 journal article by an author named Wilson and a whole team of scientists that proves it's the mitochondria that supply the energy for nitric oxide production. And it makes sense because the first clinical indication of insulin resistance is a mitochondrial disorder that impacts the metabolism. The first clinical indication of insulin resistance in men is typically erectile dysfunction. You look at type 2 diabetics, you look at men with metabolic syndrome, that is advanced insulin resistance, and a high percentage of them also report erectile dysfunction. There's a standardized questionnaire about this thing. But when a doctor sees a man with erectile dysfunction, right away he's thinking, this is a metabolic disorder. I got to test him for insulin sensitivity now. I got to look for, is he pre-diabetic? And the only way that makes sense is if it is the mitochondria in the endothelium that supply the energy. Why does that make sense? Well, when cells become insulin resistant, it's because the mitochondria are damaged. They're just not as good at making energy. They can only make so much. And oddly enough, an erection is asking a lot of energy out of a tiny little tissue. It's no wonder it's one of the first things to go when your metabolism goes south. So what creates this mitochondrial dysfunction? There are three things that I've identified so far. One of them, seed oils. The lining of your cells is made of fats. It's made of lipids. Fats are not just for storing energy in our body. They're also a structural component of your body. You get too many seed oils, too many omega-6 or linoleic acid, you're going to mess with the membrane. It changes the structure of the cell membrane, and it makes it more difficult to transport glucose across. That's insulin resistance, but that might not be damaged mitochondria. The way you damage the mitochondria is too many carbohydrates. When the carbohydrates flood the bloodstream, they work their way into the cells, and then they got to diffuse to the mitochondria where the cells reside. The mitochondria are responsible for converting the energy so that you can either use it for movement or growth or wound repair or whatever your body needs, including creating new lipids to store in your white fat cells. Too much glucose all at once in the mitochondria produces too many reactive oxygen species. So there's a lot of metaphors here. The one that stuck with me is because I used to have an electric train when I was a kid, and the electric train is going around the track. And this is how I learned circuits, like in 1973, because that Christmas I got an electric train, and the crank up on the volume or on the voltage makes the train go faster. It creates more sparks. That is, the more energy you're trying to put through the same mitochondrial area, the more reactive oxygen species you're throwing off. Ordinarily, that's not a problem. Melatonin in the mitochondria will absorb these reactive oxygen species. The ROS, they'll also signal like, hey, you need some more mitochondria in here, and the whole body will work towards homeostasis. But when you have too many carbs for too long, you use up that mitochondria melatonin, you create too many ROS, they damage the mitochondrial DNA, and the mitochondrial DNA never get a chance to bounce back. So this is the third way you can knock your metabolism out of whack, and that is get the wrong kind of light, mess up I call it mal-illumination, mess up your circadian rhythm, too much blue light at night, because this messes up your melatonin. Mitochondria synthesize their own melatonin. You can't take like a melatonin supplement and think that that's going to make it through your digestive tract into your bloodstream, through the cell wall, into your mitochondria, and you're like, I'm good with my reactive oxygen species. I can eat all the carbs I want, because it's not the way it works. Mitochondria synthesize their own melatonin because they need it right there at the site that which these metaphorical sparks are being generated. You don't give your mitochondria the right kind of light. You don't give them time to recover, like either fasting or ketosis or just fasting from carbs. You give them the wrong kind of oils, seed oils, rather than animal fats, for example, or rather than fruit oils, and you're going to mess your mitochondria up. When your body is growing really fast, adolescence, puberty, a lot of energy is getting used just to fuel growth. Then you get into your mid-20s, and instead of growing up, some people are growing out from the waist now. A lot of guys in their mid-20s will still be in good shape. They'll be exercising, they'll be working out. But if their diet isn't right, and their light is not right, and they're eating too many carbs, you can be lean and fit and still have a crappy metabolism. And it's for men, it's going to show up first in their sexual function. That is the first sign that something is wrong with your metabolism and you got to make some changes. So I'm going into all this theory and this complicated microbiology, none of which anybody really needs to know. What do they really need to know? If you want to improve your sexual performance, you got to take care of your mitochondria, because sex is a metabolically intensive act, and not in ways that we would have thought, in surprising ways. So how do you take care of your mitochondria? Sauna is actually a really good thing. Sauna is not good for your testes. Like, you are too much sauna and you're going to cut your sperm production. So if you're trying to conceive a child, maybe plan a family, sauna is not the right way for you. But if family planning and conception is not your goal, sauna promotes vasodilation. It promotes nitric oxide production. It's great for the vascular system. So it's a good way to improve your circulatory system, improve your erections. That's one. Another one, go with the intermittent fasting. Do some meal skipping. Get the seed oils out of your diet. Get the carbs out of your diet. I like to cycle in and out of keto, and the ice bath is really good for this. The point is to give your mitochondria a break from those carbohydrate intensive meals. So that's two. The third one is get some cold. Cold is one of the best things you can do to take care of your mitochondria. And this is how it happens. You get in the cold and right away you're clearing glucose out of the bloodstream. You're already burning fats because it boosts your metabolism. You start that non-shivering cold thermogenesis, and your body's like, I need more brown fat. Well, brown fat is packed with mitochondria. Every brown fat cell has thousands of mitochondria. Where is your body going to get these mitochondria? It has to make them. Cold exposure stimulates two processes. The first one is the death of the damaged mitochondria. Your body has mechanisms for saying which are the mitochondria that aren't working that great. It'll find them, it'll kill them, recycle the pieces to synthesize new mitochondria, which are called mitobiogenesis. So these two processes are both the death and the birth of new mitochondria. It selects the best ones to reproduce more and create more mitochondria for your new brown fat cells to use. Even if it has to start with a white fat cell and create new, this is a process called beiging. Starts with a white fat cell, creates new mitochondria in it, now becomes beige or kind of light brown, and then go all the way to brown, where its only job is to produce heat and hormones that your thyroid and your brain and other parts of your body need. Cold exposure is one of the best things you can do to take care of your mitochondria, because without it, your mitochondria are just kind of getting, lazy. I know that's, it's probably not the right way. It's not a scientifically valid term to say they're lazy, but you are not stimulating the production of new high quality mitochondria unless you're getting some cold. There are a couple of foods that can do it, and cold is way more effective than I don't know, hatch chilies or something really spicy that will also get you going. There are some drugs, metformin, rapamycin, berberine as a supplement. And these drugs improve your insulin sensitivity. So they will, if you are metabolically out of whack, they will give your insulin the boost it needs to get that glucose into the cell and keep the mitochondria working, which is why they're also effective for life extension, because aging is a mitochondrial phenomenon. When the mitochondria accumulate damage, you begin to see the diseases of aging. So there are some of these drugs and supplements that will do it. And one of them is Viagra. Viagra will not heal your mitochondria. It will not stimulate mitobiogenesis. But what it does is overcome insulin resistance. So now your endothelium, they're getting the energy that they need. The mitochondria that are there are like, all right, we can crank out that nitric, the energy that the endothelium need for nitric oxide production. And for the next 4 hours, vasodilation, not a problem. Then you go right back to where you were with Viagra. Well, we think of Viagra as like the man's pill, you know, just like men shouldn't be taking women's birth control pills. Most women are like, and I shouldn't be taking Viagra. That's not the case. They're two totally different mechanisms within the body. This idea that Viagra will overcome insulin resistance and improve your circulation, your whole vascular function, it's a profound idea. Viagra was originally formulated to treat heart disease, to treat hypertension. There's a thing called angina, where your heart is not getting enough, it's chest pain, where your heart is not getting enough blood. And you feel like, I don't feel right, I don't have enough energy. And Pfizer was like, oh, we're going to come up with this thing that improves vascular function so that your heart can get more blood. We're going to dilate your blood vessels, and that's going to take your blood pressure down. They start this clinical trial. They start giving out the little blue pills to people who have high blood pressure and angina. And the men come back and they say, well, I don't know about my blood pressure, doc. How's it looking? But can I talk to you about something? And the doctor's like, sure, what is it? And man after man is like, I'm taking your blood pressure pills and I'm getting these wicked hard-ons. What's going on? And Pfizer goes, to hell with blood pressure. You know, we're going to get this approved for impotence. They want to market it, so they can't call it impotence. They invent a new term called erectile dysfunction. And those are all the ads that we see now. There's like a beach and a beautiful lady and stuff like, and now everybody's taking the little blue pill. Turns out women also have erectile tissue. Turns out their erectile tissue works the exact same way that male erectile tissue does, but it's not as dramatic. It's not, you know, nobody's looking for a clitoral erection, and it's not a barrier to reproduction. But women tolerate Viagra very well, and they get the same sort of vascular benefits from it. So it's not a hormone. It works on the vascular system. One of the things that they prescribe Viagra for is hypoxic brain injury in infants. And that blew my mind, because the baby, whether it was asphyxiated by the umbilical cord for whatever reason, baby's development of their brain, you see this because you just had a son and he comes out with this tiny little head. And then you're like, it's been 4 months and he can, you know, he can't even hold his head up. It's so big. Everything up here is growing so fast. In the first half a year or so of life, up to 60% of the energy that your son is taking in through nursing is just going into the brain, thinking, learning, and growing brain tissue. That is an enormous metabolic burden. For these babies to recover from hypoxic brain injury, they need mega vascular system. They need to get the energy into those brain cells as fast as and as best they can. Viagra does that. So we think about Viagra so wrong because we've got it associated, you know, with the penis, when actually it works throughout the body. We think about the ice bath so wrong because we have it associated, you know, with shrinkage, when actually it's improving the metabolism and all of the vasculature by exercising those smooth muscles and giving them the energy they need to dilate. Now that I've I figured this out. I'm trying to explain it to men and to women because it is the easiest thing you're ever going to do. I really shouldn't say that. People tell me how hard it is to get in the ice, and I get it. 2 minutes in the ice, and then you get up and you feel like wonderful. You feel like a superhero or something, and you have done so much for your vascular system. 10 days, and you're going to have brown fat. So when I say it's easy, I mean that there aren't going to be, what the pharmacy industry calls side effects. You're not going to have to take more pills to deal with the effects of the pills that you already took. It's going to be a systemic benefit, and exercise will help a lot, but exercise will not bring you the brown fat you need to stimulate the mitobiogenesis at the same rate as the ice bath. So I get that it's uncomfortable, and I get that it's painful, and I get that psychologically it's difficult. In other respects, 10 minutes a day, pop in there a couple of 3 times a week, and you're going to see a big difference for men in your sexual function.
Mm-hmm. And I have some anecdotal evidence myself of this. So
tell me.
Yeah, there was a whole lot there. And I did not know that the first thing to really be witnessed is erectile dysfunction, and that doctors should be looking at that. I can tell you from personal experience, because I have had my run-ins with erectile dysfunction and Viagra personal use in the past. Do not recommend it. So doctors are not asking for this, because if you just ask for the prescription, then they will write it up for you. They'll tell you to take your pants down, be like, oh, here's your prescription. And with the fats, I just did a podcast. I released a podcast the previous week talking about keto. This is something that definitely helped me out in my life. And one of the people that I love reading, Dr. Jerry Tennant, he mentions that, your cell membranes are composed of lipids. So if you are eating these seed oils, these rancid seed oils, things that are prone to oxidation, then your cell membranes are not very sturdy. So we are warned to stay away from saturated fats, that they are the devil, that they're going to cause heart attacks. Absolutely false, not true. I eat a ton of butter. Fat does not make you fat. I'm able to stay lean year round. And I would definitely recommend listening to that podcast if you are a little bit fearful of consuming fats, if your doctor told you something different. And this absolutely changed my life. With what you said about the stimulation, I do agree to that point, because we discussed it last time. I had Adrienne on the podcast as well. She fixed her autoimmune Hashimoto's through cold exposure. And I do believe that we are understimulated. I believe that one of the issues that affected me in the past when I was dealing with these issues was I was wearing Under Armour compression shorts, which are tights.
Oh, James.
That's number 4 for you.
Yep.
So your testes, your ball sack, I'm just going to say it, like they are supposed to go through these ranges as well. As you discussed in our previous podcast, we're in a temperature controlled environment. We stay indoors. We wake up in the morning. We get a little bit of sunlight, maybe, which our melatonin production is going to go down. We're not exposed to these infrared rays and such. That has its own host of detrimental effects on the body. Please go listen to the red light episode that I did with mono red light. But we are indoors in this temperature controlled environment, so we are not stimulated. The same would go for your gonads, your balls. And maybe a little bit too much information for this, but whatever, we're here, we're talking about it. I free ball 90% of the time. I let them hang. And as I said, your testes are supposed to go through this full spectrum range. If you're hot, guess what? They're gonna sag.
Yep.
If you're cold,
that's their job.
Yep. Get that shrinkage. Yep. So I fully agree with you. I think that it could be a conspiracy. We're supposed to get sunlight on our entire body. We don't sun our balls, so that never gets any type of light, and they're always covered in clothing. So I definitely think that there's something there. So I would add that to number 4, is we are not being stimulated. We are not getting these ranges of temperatures, which I think is a huge contributor to especially down there in your nether regions, where you get this vasoconstrictive effect, the muscles contract, and then they have more of ability now to actually relax as well. They're being understimulated. So I would add that one as well.
Clients come to you and they want to exercise all their skeletal muscles. These are the muscles that are attached to our bones. They control, our major movements. It's fine. Everybody should do that. And how are they exercising the smooth muscle tissue that controls their vasculature? Nobody ever told them that. And you can't open up a copy of Men's Health and go, wow, look at the smooth muscles on that guy. I mean, it doesn't make any sense because these are tiny little muscles. But guess what? If they don't exercise, if they don't go through the vasoconstriction, vasodilation cycle, then just like the rest of the muscles, they're like, what do you need me for? And your body will reapportion the resources that it needs in response to the stresses that you give it. It's no wonder your vascular system goes to crap because you can't exercise the smooth muscle tissue in the gym. You do it in the cold bath. You do it in the sauna. You do it with the thermal contrast therapy. Now, Adrienne, she grew up in Florida and she's living in Phoenix. She says, I hate the cold. We started this company in 2018 and Adrienne didn't want to have anything to do with it at first. Her first ice bath, like 11 seconds long. Well, she'd been avoiding the cold like ever since she was a little girl. As a result, her brown fat is down to nothing. You hit 40 and more than 95% of Americans have no detectable brown fat at all from that age on. Babies have about 30% of their body weight is brown fat. And it just keeps going down, down, down. And the less cold you get, the less brown fat you have. Now, most people are like, well, that's not a big deal. I'm not planning on shivering. But brown fat is not just a thermogenic organ. It is also a secretory organ. That is, it produces hormones on which the rest of your body depends. The brown fat and the thyroid are in constant communication with one another. No brown fat, and you got this thyroid like trying to dial up on the phone, like, where are you? There's no thyroid stimulating hormone coming out of the brown fat because that's one of the essential functions of brown fat is to make more thyroid stimulating hormone than any other organ in the body. And that communicates with the thyroid and the thyroid communicates back with the brown fat and together they control metabolism. No brown fat means your thyroid is dysregulated. It's got no speedometer on it. It could go hyper, it could go hypo. When Adrienne, she started doing some keto, she fixed some things in her diet and she added cold exposure. When she recruited brown fat back into her body, she brought her thyroid back into stable function. Her Hashimoto's went away. She got off of all of her meds. So I don't mean to say that brown fat is a miracle. Brown fat is something that human beings are evolved to have. We're born with it and we're meant to keep some portion of it. So then people typically ask me, well, that's fine for you, Tom. Your people are from the North Sea or some of your own Northwestern European, and it must have been cold up there for your great, great, great ancestors. But what about the equatorial people? Why should they have brown fat? Why should they get cold? And it's a decent question. It's a very challenging question. Until you think about where do archaeologists and anthropologists think the first Homo sapiens emerged? Most of them are like East Africa. And you're like, well, that's right on the equator. That's really warm. Why would Homo sapiens need brown fat? Except where does Wim Hof take all his instructors when they're up Mount Kilimanjaro, which is right on the equator? There are 4 active glaciers in East Africa, and they're all on the equator. When the ice age comes, human beings get put, these Homo sapiens, they get pushed like to the edge between the ice that's coming off the mountain and the ocean, even if they live in East Africa. And the ice is melting and it creates the streams, and those streams are cold. And then people say, well, why is that a big deal? I mean, do gorillas need brown fat? Do bonobos need brown fat? Do chimpanzees need brown fat? And I say, I don't know. I don't study them, but we're not them. We have 99% of our DNA, we share with those bonobos, but our nostrils go down, not out. We're not covered with hair. We have subcutaneous fat like dolphins and manatee and whales. if we're unhealthy, we have the visceral fat. Our anatomy, despite sharing all that DNA, is so much different than a chimpanzee or a gorilla for that matter, because we are aquatic. We were meant to fish and wade and swim and dive in those cold rivers. We were meant to give birth in those cold rivers because the water eases the pain of contraction. It makes the woman less vulnerable to certain types of predators. There's one woman in the United Kingdom. I've been looking for the woman who's like willing to try childbirth in cold water. And it takes a lot of guts. A lot of pregnant women are doing cold plunges and they report wonderful things, but it takes a lot of guts to labor in the cold water. And then I picked up this book, Chill. And it was written by a physician in the United Kingdom who was a cold water, open water swimmer, and he's part of a club and interviewed a bunch of people. And there was one woman who was so into it, she labored in the cold water. She said it was great. That as far as the difference between being on land and being in the cold water, the pain, the ease of the delivery, the healthy child. Now, I'm not a physician. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a professor of engineering. I'm not recommending this. I'm saying, why do we all need the cold? Because all of our ancestors were up to our necks in it. We are evolutionarily designed to expect cold exposure, just like we're evolutionarily designed to expect sunshine, or just like we're evolutionarily designed to expect exercise. And if the body's expectations are not met by its environment, it's no wonder we get diseased. So exercise and diet can do a lot of good things for you. If cold is still missing, your puzzle pieces, so to speak, are incomplete.
Mm-hmm. It's like there's a few pillars in health: exercise, nutrition, light, sleep. I don't think a lot of people actually pay attention to temperature. And it makes sense with the thyroid and how Adrian was able to overcome this, because all your brown fat is also located up here. So it's almost like it's local to the thyroid. If your thyroid's off, hyper, whatever it may be, that's going to affect your other hormones as well.
You got it. Yep. Yeah. You're piecing it together because we are complex systems. Everything is in communication with everything all the time. And when one thing gets out of whack, the rest of the systems in the body, they compensate. So we can be in a disordered state without experiencing symptoms right away. Or maybe the symptoms are subtle because all these other compensatory mechanisms are now working overtime to try and protect us from degradation of function. But you do that for 10 years, for 20 years, and the rest of these systems will become dysregulated as well. Then it begins to show up as symptomatic. You go to the doctor and the doctor's like, I have a pill for that. But the pill doesn't do anything for the lack of sunshine or for the crappy diet or for the lack of exercise or for the lack of cold. All it does is continue to mask the symptoms while the underlying conditions get worse. Then we call them diseases of old age. And you get to be 57 like me, and your faculty colleagues are like, what do you mean you're not on any prescriptions? Like, my doctor says I got to have this. I'm going to be taking it for the rest of my life. And I said, well, I intend to live a lot longer than you then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Disease is dis-ease. The body is not at ease. I personally don't even truly believe in disease. It's a manifestation of all this internal stuff that we are not paying attention to. And what I actually just heard in a course that I took about a month ago, it was talking about cells, how cells that are atypical, they are not going to function properly. I've been diving into iodine, fluoride, how fluoride leads to cancer, and fluoride destroys the collagen. So if your collagen is misshaped, if your protein structure is like asymmetrical or just not shaped the way that it should be, then the function is going to be off. Well, think about how cancer spreads. If you have one cell that is dysfunctional, now all those cells in the area have to pick up the slack. They aren't doing their prescribed job anymore because this one can't cut it can't cut its slack, or it can't do the work that it's supposed to. How do you think things spread? So now it's just this body-wide spread of dysfunctional tissue. If we can restructure it, if we can tell the cells, this is what you should be doing, do your job through light, through nutrition, through exercise, through movement, through water, not non-contaminated water, filtered water, minerals, vitamins, I don't believe disease truly exists.
I do. So I'm going to
Go for it.
Why I do. I read a great book called 1491. It's a provocative title. 1492 is when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So 1491 was supposed to be this anthropological, archaeological description of what was it like in the Western Hemisphere, North and South and Central America before Columbus shows up. And it's a reconstruction based upon archaeology, but our idea of what Native American culture was is pretty much based upon these kind of colonial era accounts. The Pilgrims come over, there's Jamestown, or shoot, I spent 3 years of my life living in Indiana. It wasn't called Indiana because they were a bunch of racist people. It was called Indiana because it was the frontier at the time it was settled. And so our stories are our consciousness. They're all of long after 1491. So what happened? Well, Columbus and the explorers brought over syphilis. They brought over smallpox. They brought over a lot of diseases that the populations in North America had zero experience with. In Europe, an evolution of parasites, viruses, bacteria, and microbiological responses, they come up together. And so your ancestors, my ancestors, they've had contact with these different stressors, microbiological stressors, and developed an immune system that's attuned to them. But if you introduce a novel, could be a virus, it could be a bacteria. If you introduce a bacterium that has been trained in a hospital to be resistant to all available antibiotics, you think your immune system's going to be able to handle that? What I'm saying is, I do believe there's such a thing as disease in the sort of infectious disease sense. And it doesn't contradict for me the meaning of dis-ease, a body no longer at ease. For me, the intuition is to stay in tune with our evolutionary biological, I want to say roots, and that's not quite the right term, experiences. It's also a very popular book by Alex Haley. It was a popular TV miniseries when I was a kid, and I don't mean to be turning this into a race thing. What I mean to be saying is that 10, 20,000 years of evolution in interaction with your pathogenic environment changes what happens to the species. Our immune system has been trained by the experiences of our great ancestors as well as our own. And when the training of your immune system is discordant with the exposure, I believe you can wipe people out. That doesn't say anything about COVID. I do think it is possible to create a superbacteria by exposing it to antibiotic, and we're doing it right now in hospitals, for example. I do think it's possible to create novel pathogens with which our immune system has no experience. COVID wasn't it. But in some dystopian science fiction world, in my imagination, it could happen, and it already did in 1492. So I don't want to go too far into the I don't believe in disease. But there's nothing about that which is inconsistent with give your body what it is evolutionarily designed to expect, what it needs. Give your cells what they need to stay healthy because they know how to do it.
If you give them the proper things, they'll take care of themselves.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if you've dove into it at all, like germ theory and where your internal, the better your internal structure is, then anything that's external can't really affect you too much. That's more like Dr. Tom Callan work and such like that.
So I think they're onto something because Semmelweis was right. Wash your goddamn hands before you go operate on another patient or deliver another baby. I'm not saying germs don't exist. Semmelweis was right. But the conditions under which Semmelweis were working was like terrible. Nutrition was terrible. Factory conditions were terrible. Sanitation was terrible. Like we had to compensate for the fact that people were already in this degraded health state, surrounded by an environment that has almost conspired to make them sick. Under those conditions, you better goddamn well wash your hands because they're covered with filth. That's not the same as an environment in which a healthy body is getting what it needs.
Wasn't that like they were going from dead bodies with formaldehyde and then going to deliver babies right afterwards and the women were dying? Yeah.
Figure that out.
Probably not a good idea.
Right.
All right. So let's get back to erections. And so overall, what you're seeing is that if people are struggling with erectile dysfunction, it is an endothelial problem or actually a mitochondrial issue. And in order to resolve this, things that would help you out would be lowering your intake of carbohydrates, loading up or at least increasing your fat intake, good quality fats, not seed oils and such.
Omega-3s, fruit oils and animal fats are a good bet. And some people argue about bacon and whether it's pasture raised and stuff. And I'm like, look, get the canola oil out of your diet and you're moving in the right direction. People shouldn't be eating cotton, for goodness sakes. If there's cotton in your food, then that's not food. So there's some really basic things before you get into super optimization of fats. But you were going down the list and you were saying, get the carbs down, do a little bit of fasting, or at least carb fasting. Get the right fats, less omega-6, more omega-3. The fats that come from fruit oils, avocado, olive, these are fruits, not seeds, and from animals. Get your sleep right. Because that helps everything. And the way to get your sleep right is to get your light exposure right. And all of those things are only chipping around the edges. They're all good things to do. Eventually, if you do not get cold, if you live in Florida, for example, you can't even get cold in like the Gulf of Mexico. You can't even get cold in the Atlantic Ocean because it just doesn't get cold enough to really activate that shiver response. So all these other things that are really good to do, eventually you're going to run out of brown fat. Your mitochondria are going to accumulate the damage of all of life, and you will have failed to stimulate the mitobiogenesis you need to age at the slowest rate possible. Your dick is going to feel it first. I can't believe I just said that. Perhaps I can rephrase. You will experience it first in your in your sexual performance, right?
That's getting clipped, Tom. I'm sorry. Not sorry, but there you go.
It's in there.
But no, to your point, someone that I've worked with, and myself included, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have a rock hard boner, and I'm just like, that's pretty cool. I like that. I feel like a teenager again, or morning wood, or just randomly throughout the day. And my client, he was raving about this. Like he'd be out in the middle of the day, rock hard. He's like, man, what is this? And I know that magnesium supplementation is really important with the cold exposure. Obviously, it's a stressor and one of the first things to go when we are.
I'll tell you why. Mitochondria need magnesium. They are dense packed with it. You cannot do mitobiogenesis with cold exposure if you do not meet the nutritional demands of the mitochondria. So to synthesize new mitochondria, you're going to need magnesium. And your body will steal it out of your bones if you don't put it in your diet. Like your body's going to say, well, we got to have brown fat. This is like a life or death issue. Where are we going to get that magnesium? They will just keep going to your bones and going to your bones and going to your bones and hollow those bones out of magnesium to keep the brown fat going. If you don't replace it with your diet, and supplements are fine. I take magnesium L-threonate because it goes up into the brain. But there are plenty of forms of magnesium. What isn't going to work is spinach. Because unless you grew it yourself and you've been like fertilizing it with Epsom salt and stuff, the spinach that we get from the Central Valley of California, the spinach we get from the sands of Florida, there's no magnesium left in that because they're not growing it to be nutritious. They're growing it to sell it by the pound. So you have a great point about magnesium. The deficit will show up, not right away, because you store most of your magnesium in your bones. Only like 1% is in your bloodstream. If you have a magnesium blood test, it's irrelevant because they're only looking at 1%. You can do, however, magnesium urine tests to test your absorption. You take a supplement, you see what's in your urine, how much am I keeping in my body and how much is passing through. But it's very difficult to get an assessment of what's going on inside your body with magnesium. If you're doing cold exposure, just take a supplement. They're inexpensive. You can't overdose on magnesium. It lets you know. And by that, it gives you diarrhea. This is what I mean by lets you know. At that point, you're getting plenty of magnesium. So you're making an excellent point that magnesium is essential for metabolic health, but it's a long, slow decaying curve because your body will steal it out of your bones if it needs it in your mitochondria.
We didn't touch on this in the last podcast. I meant to, so I'm glad that we kind of discussed it here. So as he was doing the cold exposure and he was supplementing with magnesium, we were doing this certain source, magnesium bicarbonate, for quite some time, and then he came off of it and he was still getting the erection. So it wasn't just the magnesium.
No, it means his mitochondria are doing great. Yeah. But let me ask you, does he have a girlfriend?
His wife.
And okay, how does she feel about it?
Boners?
Yeah.
I mean, how could you be mad?
Well, it's complicated for the ladies because what's right for them isn't necessarily right for us. When you're in a monogamous relationship and you've got all this testosterone coursing through your bloodstream, you're taking care of your metabolism. On the one hand, the ladies might feel, oh, well, this is, I'm so sexy. Look at what I inspire in my man. And, it's a very flattering feeling, or at least it can be. But on the other hand, my girlfriend has asked me to promise to not do anything to further increase my testosterone or improve. I want to stay healthy, hon, and I want to live a long life. And you're 13 years younger than I am. And so, I want to age gracefully. And she's like, Tom, I'm tired. Just don't do anything more. And I kind of see where she's coming from. So this is why it's one of these things we don't talk enough about. Like, how do the ladies perceive that? When Ben Greenfield's wife was interviewed, she said, well, during all, Ben's experiments, we're in this together. And so we've taken the frequency of our sex from once or twice a week up to at least a couple or 3 times a week. And I'm going, what? If I was going to inject stem cells into my dick to get better performance, I'm not shooting for 2 or 3 times a week. I'm like, babe, 2 or 3 times a day. We got to make some time for this. But every couple is a little bit different, and men and women can be mismatched in their libido.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. There's levels, as you mentioned before, like the bench press. So, I mean, I guess that honestly comes down to the guy. Like you have to find a way to resolve that issue. You can't obviously go in a cage, but what strategies would you have personally for that if you aren't matched?
There is, whether it's on the internet or in your church or whatever, there is a social stigma. There's a lot of shame around masturbation. I'm not even talking about porn. I'm talking about masturbation. And I'm like, so what? I just want to get over that. She can help. She can be there with you. But this is a biological thing. I started doing ice baths. I haven't had a wet dream since I was like 17. And then here I am in my 50s. And I'm having these extremely vivid dreams. This is telling me something. Just rub one out. And there's no shame in this. That's all some socially constructed thing that I don't even know what that is about. Like Kellogg and his cornflakes trying to think that all he has to do is ruin the metabolism of American men so that they no longer participate in the sin of masturbation. I'm not taking anything away from my girlfriend. If I have a need and she's not available to meet it, and I take care of it myself. However, it does introduce other relational issues. Like if you don't have this conversation with her, if she's not on board with this, I don't know, she might be offended. She might feel inadequate. She might feel superfluous. Again, men and women don't talk enough about this. And as you're experiencing a change in your sexual function, you're going to experience change in your sexual needs. If you do this in the context of an exclusive monogamous relationship, and you don't sit your wife or your girlfriend down and say, by the way, I saw this crazy podcast with this guy, he's got dreadlocks and he talks to a professor and they said this thing about ice baths and boners. And so I just want to let you know, I'm going to try this. If you don't have that conversation, then I think you're setting yourself up for some really difficult feelings. These things, what I'm suggesting is explain what's going on. And then as you encounter the obstacles, formulate experiments, like try different things without you're going to have to let some things go. And one of those things you're going to let go is shame and an unwillingness to communicate.
Yeah. I mean, communication with any relationship is probably it's foundational. If you don't have that, you kind of really don't have anything. You have to have the hard discussions.
I agree. People communicate in different ways. And so discussion is one of them. And there's a lot of different ways to have that communication, but one way or another, if you don't have it, the expectations are going to be out of whack with the reality.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they can't mind read. I guess it would depend on how you're actually taking care of that too. Like the masturbation, if you're going to wank off to porn, I mean, I'm personally, I wouldn't say against porn, but I don't advocate for it. I had my struggles in the past with it. I believe that it's a love killer. So if you're looking at someone else have sex, it's kind of weird too, because you're watching another dude bone a girl instead of doing it yourself. And since we're on this topic, diving into some more taboo stuff.
That was terrible, right?
Yeah, if you are masturbating and you're ejaculating, you're kind of giving up your seed. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I'm reading a book called The Tao of Sexology.
No,
So
I haven't read it.
It recommends really not to ejaculate. If anything, there's a practice where you can injaculate. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
I haven't.
So
orgasm without ejaculation,
mm-hmm.
but
yeah,
I don't know if that's the same.
It kind of fits in line with that. So for the viewers out here, I believe that the sales for this book is probably going to go through the roof after I mention this type of stuff. But there's a point that's called the Genmo point. It's like a $1 million point. It's in between your balls and your ass. And then if you learn how to actually do this practice, which I'm not really going to describe here, if you want, go ahead and look it up because it seems kind of far-fetched and out there. You will not ejaculate. Your semen will actually go up through your spine and will be recirculated throughout your body. So instead of losing your life force, instead of kind of feeling depleted afterwards, which can happen if you're masturbating very frequently, which I guess I want to add that for any people that are in their teens, their 20s or so, if you're jerking off 3-4 times a day to porn, like, of course you're going to feel like shit. Of course, you're not going to feel very ambitious. You're not going to be a very driven individual. You're losing your seed and you're kind of wasting it. So I just wanted to kind of add that little bit in there. That's something for you to look into yourself. Ejaculation.
The metaphor of the seed, I want to go with it a little bit. Trees release their pollen. Like if we're going to talk about the seed and this life force and we're going to get really metaphorical, then I'm skeptical. Because I don't think of that as my life force and I'll make more.
Yeah.
But you have a good point about male motivation. When you're ambitious, you get out there, you compete, you test yourself, you risk failure. Shoot, the Vikings they call it rape and pillage, for goodness sakes. And you know why? Because the Vikings were a polygynous society. Only the richest, most powerful men had wives, and they had a lot of them. So you get to be a 17 or 18-year-old Viking, and you're there in Denmark or something. You're like, God damn it, there's no women for us, because rich Dane man over there just keeps marrying up all the good-looking ones. And then you go, well, wait a second, I digest milk. You know, those those other ones over on the continent, they can't do that yet. Let's wait for the rivers of the Rhine and the Seine and the Thames. Let's let the ice break up. Then let's get a bunch of guys. Let's get in a longboat and we're going to row across the ocean and we're going to sail up the Thames or whatever it is, and we're going to rape and pillage the villages of the springtime. Must have been great. But what motivated them to get in those frickin' longboats and row across that goddamn ocean and fight those battles? It was sex. Because without monogamous societies are much less violent than polygynous societies for these reasons. So there's something about that sex drive that motivates young men to work harder. And I know I have felt this myself. That is not a bad thing. So when you're talking about life force, I can see how it relates to motivation. I don't think it's life force, but it's like this. You can spend your days in your mother's basement jerking off to porn. You don't even have to dig the Playboys out from under, the mattress anymore. It's all right there in high definition. Or you can maybe get yourself out there and compete and make something of yourself. And guess what? Some lady might actually talk to you. Notice that you're making an effort. Boys aren't having, I say boys, I'm going to say young men, according to the surveys, aren't having anywhere near the sex that they used to. And it's not AIDS, and it's not any other kind of STD, and it's not ignorance. It is this social construction of forces that tells them they are bad for having lust and then gives them alternatives to manifest that in secret rather than actually go out and maybe talk to a girl, maybe introduce yourself, maybe give her a reason to be interested in you, play in a band, have a hobby, I don't know, make birdhouses, do something that, makes you interesting. And if it's right, I'm not going to knock it. And you say, well, I put the hole in here and then the stem, and this is particularly good for a particular species. Some girl out there is going to be like, wow.
You can do something. It's real life. So it's like the problem's been created, just like everything else. Problem's been created, and then we have been given the easy solution.
Correct. And when you seek the easy solution, I'm not shaming them, but when you seek the easy solution, the opportunity cost is the hard solution. And you get so much more out of the hard solution because you learn things. You learn how to use a saw. You learn about birds. I don't know what, if you're into D&D, then get into D&D. Like, be a great dungeon master. But maybe it's not D&D. Maybe for you it's DJ. And so go be like a terrible DJ. DJ some 8th grade birthday party. Then to get yourself going, be good at something, or at least try. And that's the hard path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you take the easy path all the time, your life becomes hard. If you do follow through with the harder decision, your life will actually become easier. It's a little paradox there.
Yep.
So
easy is a trap.
Yeah. Convenience and ease. It's like domestication. We've been domesticated. So we have the food there. You don't have to leave your house anymore. You don't need to go in the cold.
On the one hand, I'm kind of in favor of it. I mean, like, we're trying to have a civilization here, I don't want to live like the Vikings. And I got to admit, like, I live this scholarly, it's almost monastic existence. I write all day. 2 days can go by. I never even left the house. I get the sun on the porch. I have the delicious and nutritious foods delivered. I work out at home, but then I kind of go, oh, Tom, maybe you should go for a walk, but when I get into that flow state of writing, that is what I do.
So would you say there is no merit to things like semen retention? So I know there's like no fat November for people. And I was talking about a teen with this the other day. He's like trying to just get him to jerk off a little less. But do you think that women kind of pick up on that? Like whether it's a pheromone or just that you are not ambitious, not driven, and that it could be due to you depleting yourself? Because I know that it could be just a fable, but athletes were told not to have sex prior to big competitions because their drive wouldn't be as.
I remember that. I remember Rocky. you know, where Burgess Meredith is criticizing him for getting together with Adrian, and Rocky's like, oh, but I really like this girl. And Burgess Meredith is like, then let her train you. Women weakens the legs. You know, what a great movie. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
But here's, so I've tried no-fap, and here's what I've noticed. I don't think it's about seed retention, life force, things like that. I think it's like this. I'll go, let's say, a week, and then all of a sudden the fear that I have of approaching a woman becomes less than the motivation that I have to go talk to women. That is, it's not, I'm not going to sign up for seed retention, but I am going to sign up for, what are you doing instead? What are you doing instead of jerking off? Are you getting yourself out there? Are you having a conversation? Are you inviting a girl to a date? And by the way, have a freaking plan. Not like, you know, we could maybe hang out sometime. Buy some tickets. When you are frustrated because you've shut off the easy way, and you're ready to take the difficult way, your motivation gets more. You're like, I don't want to do it. It is going to so suck to go up to her and say, hi, I'm Tom. And it shouldn't be hard. You know, that's my only pickup line, James. Hi, I'm Tom. You know, there's two things that happen. One is fear of rejection. And fear of rejection, it kind of sucks, but that's not really my problem. It's fear of success. Like, what if she says yes? Oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like, I got to get dressed. I got to have a car. You know, like all these expectations. Yeah, boy, the easy way out seems so tempting. And when you shut off the easy way out, the only thing that's left is the hard way. And so I have noticed that. I don't know if women notice some kind of pheromone thing, but I do notice, I do think they notice when I talk to them. So I think my behavior has changed during those periods.
It's a little bit more of a disciplined practice. So like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. If you're doing everything haphazardly and you're just jerking off 4 times a day and you could have been productive, after you do that, you're scrolling on your phone. Yeah, it's like, of course you're going to have some low self-worth, some low self-confidence there.
And then you start beating yourself up about, why did I do that? But you know exactly why you did that. So don't even ask these stupid questions. You did that because the fears and anxieties that are associated with doing all the other stuff are worse.
I like what you mentioned about it's not fear of failure, it's fear of success, because that's something that's come up a lot for me in my life, and I feel like it's kind of held me back. And it's something that I think about. It's like with the podcast, what if this thing blows up and it's getting millions and millions of views and it's up there with Joe Rogan and everyone's like, when are you releasing the new episode? I'm like, that excites me, and I'm gearing more towards allowing that to happen and receiving that. But before, my main thing was, damn, what could this turn into if this does blow up, or if I am successful in this area of my life, then I'm going to be popular. I'm not going to have time to myself anymore. It's like, you kind of got to live.
I've got something I help myself with. I will figure that out when I get there. And I just got to remind myself of that.
Yeah. That's probably one of my favorite sayings too. That's why we're on the show together, brother. Figure it out. I don't have all the answers.
Exactly.
We'll figure it out.
I don't know is a really powerful thing. When you can follow it up with, here's how I would find out, or here's who I would ask, or here's I don't know what's going to happen, but this is the experiment that I want to run so I can find out. I don't know can also be very defensive. I don't know. But that's not what I mean. I mean, I don't know as it's a positive thing. It doesn't mean you're ignorant. And technically you are, but it's I don't know that moves you forward. That's something I'm curious about. Let's find that out.
Yep. That's why I got all these books back here.
Yeah.
I get more books than I can read at this point, man. And it's why I like having these conversations too, because I don't have the answers to everything, and
learn so much.
Being able to communicate with people that do have more experience than me, it's like that's a fast pass to learning.
Which reminds me, what's your son doing now that he wasn't doing a couple of weeks ago?
Oh man, he is eating like a monster. We went to Puerto Rico and I gave him a tostone, little plantain, and
Okay.
that was the first time that he ever just nommed on something other than mommy's breast. And after that, he ate a ribeye, fish, he had shrimp last night, more steak. He loves meat. So thank
You
God.
make him hungry. This is wonderful.
Good. Every
Yeah.
every single time that we eat, I cut him a little strip of ribeye or whatever it might be, and
Yeah.
he's lapping it up. So,
Good
uh,
job, man.
actually, since we're on that topic, we have a book called Baby-Led Weaning, and you got to be able to discern what you read in a lot of these books too, because it depends on when it was published.
Yeah.
But there's stuff in there saying, oh, if it's difficult to get your child to eat like grain-based stuff like cereals, oats, these are things that you should be introducing right away. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And the kids are smart. So if you give them a plate and it's got bread, whatever grain-based thing it may be, and then it's got fruits and then meat. And the problem there is that they're avoiding the grains that are supposed to be so healthy for us. No, the kid's telling you he doesn't like that stuff. And I was raised on Enfamil.
Mhm.
I'm adopted, so I didn't have mama's breast milk. And the go-to for me was Enfamil. I was quote unquote allergic to Enfamil. No, I wasn't allergic to Enfamil. It's poison. Of course. Of course you're going to be allergic and your body's going to reject it. Like you're going to either throw it up or you're going to shit it out really quick. So, yep, that's a little update with baby.
That's fantastic. I love the updates because it's very gratifying. I did not know any of these things when, I was 30 years old and my son was an infant. And I did what my mother did with me, Cheerios and apple juice. And I still kick myself about that. I'm like, what was I thinking? But the truth is, I wasn't thinking. I wasn't even in touch with anything except the habits that I was raised with. I wouldn't do it that way again. I would do it the way you're doing it. Fish, plantain, whole fruits, not juice. And cut him a little piece of ribeye. Give him the fat off of it. See how he likes that.
Loves it.
Yeah.
Absolutely loves it. So I'm glad that we don't have an issue there. He loves the meats and everything like that. And yeah, people, you can't fix what you don't know. And people are, I like to believe that they're doing the best to their knowledge. So this information wasn't available to you in the past. Now we have things like podcasts, and that's the reason why I put this type of stuff out there. So maybe people are like, oh, I never thought about this.
Yep.
I didn't know that I can improve my erection quality through cold plunge.
Yep. And there's a caveat. The only advice worth taking is, this is what worked for me. Like, you don't know if it works for you. Just because somebody did a scientific study and they got a P equals 0.02 or whatever the hell, you don't know if you're in the 98% for whom this worked or the 2% for whom it just didn't work. Science isn't proof. The only thing that's proof is your N equals 1 experience. So you hear something that worked well for someone else and you say, you know what? I have a lot in common there. I'll give that a try. If it doesn't work, then don't do it. You have to try out all the things that you hear for yourself in your own context, on your own body or with your own child, and see what works for you.
I do think that you can learn from other people, though. Other people's
Absolutely. You learn a series of experiments and you prioritize this experiment. You say, oh, that worked for James. That's an instructive story right there. I want more of what James has. I'm going to try some of those things in my life. And if they don't work, then don't do them. Talk to more people whom you admire, whom have success, whom you might want to emulate. But everybody is an individual at different paths in their life and different places in their life. And just because something worked over here that didn't work for you, that doesn't make you a failure. It doesn't mean you did it wrong. It means it didn't work for you. A lot of us will carry these dysfunctional behaviors, and somehow we will feel better if we can convince other people to adopt the same crappy, dysfunctional behaviors. And nobody stops to say, how well is that working for you? except I guess Dr. Phil, he's well, how's that working for you? And then everything stops and people go, well, I guess it isn't working for me. The only advice that's worth taking is someone whom you admire who says, when I was in a similar situation as you, I did this and it worked out like that. I suppose it's also good to take advice like, this is what didn't work for me. When I told the cop off on the side of the road, that didn't work out too well for, that's just an example. So what did or didn't work when they were in an analogous situation? And then you run an experiment. You don't take advice so much as you try advice and you say, well, that worked out pretty well. I guess I'm going to do more of that. I guess I'm going to adapt that into my own practice. And I'm thinking about you as a trainer. Everybody's body is a little bit different. You might say, well, these are the kinds of things that have worked. But if you sense that it's not working for one of your clients or it needs to be adapted for their body, then adapt it. Everybody's different.
You got to pivot sometimes. Yep. And to your earlier point, like you were doing the best of your abilities with the foods and such, we've kind of been just like bred into this dysfunctional society. So generation after generation, we just have no idea of what the truth actually is. And we're kind of just living in this whole matrix system. So the things that helped me, that when I started to zoom out a little bit, because you can't see the picture when you can't see the bigger picture when you're actually in it. So staying on topic with the whole erectile dysfunction, I told you that I would tell you this story in the podcast. I would personally stay away from Viagra if you are in your mid-20s, or honestly, I think that you can fix it through natural means like I did. Things that helped me personally were getting out of the compression tights, cold exposure, definitely reducing my carbohydrate intake. I did keto for about 3 years, and then I tried out some pro-metabolic diet, which I thought was honestly crap. It's a lot of carbs to me. Orange juice. It didn't
work for you. Yeah.
and now I'm back to keto, and I love it. I feel good on the fats. I feel good on moderate protein. Getting sun and getting much better sleep. I reduced caffeine. So the whole reason why I went through the Viagra route was because I was doing something completely opposite. I was eating things like Ben and Jerry's. I was in the compression tights. I was sweating all day in them. Wasn't getting very good sleep. I had insomnia at the time. My testosterone was very, very low. It was like in the 200s at that time. It was fucking scary. Before the baby, it was in the 600s. And my experience with the Viagra, this is a scary story. It actually sent me to the ER. The reason why it sent me to the ER is because I was out of these little rave festivals and I was partying. And back in the day when I was bodybuilding, I was taking pre-workouts like Jacked pre-workout, which had like a precursor to meth. So I was worried at the time that if I'm taking these stimulant drugs, then I'm going to have stim dick. I'm not going to be able to get hard. You mentioned whiskey dick earlier before. So sent me to the ER. I was in a full panic and that shit was not worth it. But what the doctor or the nurse, the male nurse told me, and this is an embarrassing story at the time because I'm 26, 27. He's like, bro, you don't need that shit. He didn't even care about the other drugs.
Yeah.
All he cared about was the Viagra. It's like, you don't need that. What are you doing? So that was a big wake up moment.
What'd you tell him?
I was just praying for my life at that point, brother. So I didn't even respond.
What did you feel like? What were the symptoms that sent you to the emergency room?
Oh man, afterwards, the room was spinning. Like it looked like the ceiling was morphing and it had these black holes in it. And that was prior to me going to the emergency room. I was actually able to drive myself to the emergency room. So the room was spinning, saw black holes in it and stuff like that. Just went about my day, went back home. And then I spent the entire day in a bathtub. I was cycling heat and cold. My body temperature was going through the roof or it was plummeting. I couldn't tell what I needed. And actually, I just sat there. I was with my girlfriend at the time. And then when she came to check on me, she's like, I thought you were dead. Looked like a dead fish. I didn't even realize that I lost consciousness.
What a scary experience, especially in the bathtub. You could have been dead. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my experience with Viagra. Threw it out afterwards.
Well, you talked me out of it.
Yeah, there are natural ways to fix this shit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a very healthy route to take for anyone, even if it does improve vasodilation throughout the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I got. Hopefully,
sharing that story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Really. So, would you say, I guess, ending, what other things have helped you? You never experience any of this type of stuff?
I don't know if that's good fortune or what, because it's not like I've been doing ice baths my whole life, and it's not like I've eaten great my whole life. I used to weigh 250 pounds. I'm barely 6 feet tall. Like, I haven't been in great shape. So, I don't know that like my personal experience, is all that transferable. I wish that I had a greater range of personal experiences. I could write better articles for it. Instead, I have to talk to more people and do more interviews and incorporate their stories into it. I'm not giving up the ice bath, though. Now, because I said so, I've got this girlfriend I care about a lot. She's 13 years younger than me. Well, I want to age as gracefully as I can. And now that I know more about metabolism and mitochondria, and I know that aging is driven by mitochondrial degradation, I'm doing everything I can to take care of them. That includes magnesium. It includes the ice baths. It includes going in and out of keto. Saladino was really good on this. He wrote the carnivore code. And then he put fruit in his diet. He's no longer carnivore. And he's got really good reasons for it. It's always whole fruit. He's down in Costa Rica, and I don't know about those tropical fruits for me, but there's blueberries in my fridge. It's July. I should be eating blueberries. We're not meant to be in keto all the time, because if you can work seasonal fruits in, I think that's probably good for your metabolism too.
Yeah, I did notice a little bit benefit when I would do a little bit more cycling or throw some carbs into, instead of staying always in ketosis or always high fat, moderate protein.
There are sometimes, I like my flax grains, and there's some seeds that I like to eat. And when it's fall, it's harvest time, I'm like, Tom, have some grains. Like, this is the time when people would gather the seeds. And maybe that's just a rationalization, because sometimes the carbs taste so good. So I'll go in and out.
Yeah. It's hard to get off the train once you get on it. But I do think there is some logic there where it's like, all right, we would have carbohydrates in abundance during certain times. So, all right, we can load up on those. And then we would, if we do load on some body fat, well, now we have some energy throughout the winter when we do not have those available to us.
Yep. That's when you're eating the fish. And for me, it would be cheese and other dairy. That's not right for everybody, but that's what it would be for me.
Awesome, Tom. Well, I think these discussions need to happen more often. And after our last correspondence, I was actually thinking is like, yeah, you said you like to talk more often. Should make it almost like a regular thing where it's like talk to
Yep.
Tom.
Go write another article. We'll talk about that.